Wednesday, 15th of November. Over many months, Jesus has been travelling with the 12, his chosen group of human apprentices, teaching in synagogues and village squares. He also spent times at home in Capernaum, thinking and praying and preparing for future journeys while his companions fished, mended their nets, and then fished again. All this while, Jesus' fame spread, mostly for all the people he healed or freed from opposition influence. Against the near hysteria caused by these acts of kindness, Jesus has struggled to focus people's minds on his Father's plan and on the challenge to be ready for that life which lies beyond human death. Today began much as any day. Jesus and his entourage left the town of Asochis and headed off for the next place on their itinerary, Sepphoris, up in the Galilean hills. While they were travelling, there was a knock on my door from a flustered angel, one Oriel, who, I have to admit, I hardly recognised. "Yes, angel?" I inquired of the timid spirit on my threshold. "Can I come in a moment?" "Of course you can." It is all too easy to forget that whereas I have angels at my door several times a day, for some of those angels it is a once-in-an-eon trauma to visit an archangel. Oriel looked furtively up and down the corridor before hopping into my office and shutting the door silently. I smiled at the frightened spirit and invited him to sit down. At the same time, I glanced through my files to find out who this agitated individual was. By moving at the steady pace that angels expect from their seniors, I managed to locate the relevant file and calmly asked, "What is it that brings you so far from Nazareth, Oriel?" "You probably won't remember me," he began, "but I've been appointed as guardian to James Josephson, the brother of—" At this point, he leaned across the desk towards me and spoke in hushed tones. "I shut the door because Archangel Michael warned us that we were not to mention a word of this to anyone, but I assumed that it's all right for me to tell you, and I didn't want to bother our boss in case there was nothing really to it at all." Usually I can read the thoughts of lower angels before they speak, but this poor spirit was in such a dither that his thought patterns were a total jumble. I was also annoyed to hear that Michael had been given instructions without informing me. Putting my irritation to one side for the moment, I told Oriel, "You are wise to be cautious, but I do not think that you need to worry about opposition ears here." "You can never be too sure," Archangel Michael told us. "Even the leader of the opposition sometimes disguises himself as an angel of light." "It may be so," I replied reassuringly, "but I promise you that I am not he dressed up as me." The angel looked momentarily worried, and I managed to catch his thoughts as he wondered if he had been over hasty in knocking in my door. Then he considered what he might have done to check out my identity. I interrupted. "You were telling me, Oriel, who it is that you look after, James, the brother of—" The angel said nothing but pointed towards the office where the Son used to work before taking up residence on earth. "Oriel," I said, "if you have important information relating to Jesus of Nazareth, then you were quite right to come to me. I tried to tell Michael, but you were quite right to come to me." "The thing is," said the angel, beginning to relax, "the thing is that James left Nazareth this morning along with his mother and his younger brothers, and they're headed for Sepphoris to stop Jesus." I completed his floundering sentence. "Yes. The whole thing has been brewing for a few weeks now, with James gathering stories of Jesus' activities. He thinks he's gone too far. That is, James thinks Jesus has gone too far, if you understand me." I nodded. "This is too much, he keeps saying, and now he plans to stop Jesus altogether and take him home to Nazareth." A sudden darkness clouded my spirit. We'd expected resistance and confrontation, but it had never entered my mind that such activities might come from Jesus' own earthly family. I know he had a bumpy ride in Nazareth last year, but this was a shock, and Michael, for all his scaremongering, had overlooked the danger just as easily as I had. I stood up, gathered my paperwork. Shariel, you have done very well. Let's go up and catch up with James before he catches up with Jesus. Plunging back into the restless currents of time, Shariel led me to his human charge. James is not in any way a headstrong character. He is a gentle and cautious man who's always sensitive to the concerns of people around him. When he and Jesus played together as children, Jesus was always the adventurous and outspoken one. James would reprimand him, saying, "You can't go around saying things like that. Someone might misunderstand you." It was in the same anxious mood that we found James and his family that morning on the hilly road to Sepphoris. All the family were worried about Jesus. They'd tried to stop him from packing up his tools and leaving Nazareth in the first place. Now they were nervous of his mushrooming fame and terrified by rumours that the authorities in Jesus were taking a keen interest in every aspect of his career. As Shariel and I followed along behind Jesus' relations, I tried to make out what Mary's part was in his family uprising. Surely she would understand the nature of her son's calling. Why was she part of this posse? Did she really plan to bring an end to Jesus' work? Like Shariel, her thoughts were far too distracted for me to be able to read, but her guardian helped me out, and I was astounded to discover the level to which Mary really understands Jesus. It is usual for earthly mothers to be quite so perceptive about their children, isn't it? I was suddenly humbled to discover that this peasant woman has a clearer understanding of some aspects of Jesus' mission than I have. I made a mental note to arrange a higher level of security around her. If the opposition picked up half of what was flowing through her mind, we could be in serious trouble. We proceeded in silence, and I considered whether I should alert Michael about the security threat posed by Mary, but I was still cross with him for his interference with the routine work of my angels. Also, I wasn't confident that he could restrain himself should events in Sepphoris get ugly. Instead, I sent Michael a message asking him to meet me in my office during the Earth night. I do not know what subtle pressures human mothers and brothers can exert on their sons and siblings, but Jesus will have to handle these familial forces on his own. When we arrived at Sepphoris, Jesus was already packed into a modest-sized home, talking about lamps and lampstands. I learned long ago that it was fruitless to try and understand the creative twists and turns of the mind that managed to create both giraffes and mice out of the same set of bones. A message was passed to Jesus that his mother and brothers were waiting outside and would like to see him immediately. A hum of anticipation buzzed around the crowded room. People were eager to meet the close relatives of a man who had such remarkable powers. Perhaps they too could heal sick people and raise the dead. Jesus looked carefully at the faces of the simple village folk who'd left their daily tasks to learn about his Father's love. Their attention quickly returned to him. Meanwhile, James quietly squeezed his head round the door frame, noticing the letters JJ carved neatly into the corner of the frame, a craftsman's signature, which informed him that Jesus himself had built this house. Jesus noticed his brothers and addressed the crowd. "Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?" The question caused a surprised murmur in the room. Could it be that the teacher from Capernaum didn't know his own family? Such a situation would be unthinkable for a Jew. Jesus looked into James's eyes as he waited for quiet. It was a look that I have seen many times before, and it means, "I know that you cannot understand what I'm about to do or say. Please trust me." When the people were still, he stretched out his arms to encompass everyone present and smiled broadly at the few children sitting on the floor at his feet. "Here are my mother and my brothers," he said. They looked at him, enchanted by the idea that they might consider themselves so close to one so famous. Whoever does God's will, Jesus continued, is my brother and sister and mother. James looked intently at the one with whom he had played as a child, the one who had given him the family business. He felt a pain of loss in his heart as he tried to share his remarkable brother with everyone else who serves God. A hand grasped his, the cool, firm hand of his mother. "Come on, James, my love," she said. "We'll go home. He's fine. Let's go." James held on to Jesus' gaze as he retreated from the house, his body a battleground of conflicting emotions. As he set off towards Nazareth, I returned here to my office to wait for Michael.